Welcome to ConCensis, a podcast from Censis Technologies.
Welcome back to another great episode of ConCensis Podcast brought to you by Censis Technologies. I'm your host, Vanessa, and today we'll be speaking with Mark Copeland, Vice President of Sales at 3T Medical Systems. He's going to break down the data, trends, and arguments you need to help convince your C-suite that improvements in your SPD are vital to the operation of your facility. Welcome, Mark. It's great to have you on the podcast today.
It's so nice to be here with you, Vanessa. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Mark, before we dive into this complex conversation, could you give our audience a brief introduction and talk a little bit about your role and your background?
Sure. My name is Mark Copeland. I'm the Vice President of Sales for 3T Medical Systems Incorporated. I've been in sales for 28 years. 25 of them have been in the medical, pharma, biotech field. 18 of those have been in med device, and concomitantly 10 of those have been calling on sterile processing departments. So, and for some reason, I apparently have a knack for value analysis. So I kind of joke, I have a big size 14 in the OR, a big size 14 in sterile processing, and I always have it here, a red bouffant cap for vendors in value analysis. So that's my background.
Your background is like one of those little like Russian nesting dolls. There's just another layer. There's another layer.
I don't know if it's as interesting, but yes, I'll accept the analogy.
It's just funny. You were like 20 some years. You got more and more refined.
I'm a salesperson, right? At heart.
Yes.
And I want everybody to know, like, that's what I do. And it would keep opening the nesting doll. It's going to keep coming back, salesperson.
Oh my gosh. An infinite nesting doll of Mark.
I like that.
All right. So today, Mark, you're going to break down some cost analysis as it relates to the sterile processing department and changes in the upcoming operative industry, trends, increases in surgery workload. So it's a very heavy topic, and I think a lot of people are going to be taking notes. Side note, everybody, this is a recording. You can watch it as many times as you want. So if you want to take notes, cool. If you just want to watch it on a loop, that's great. But Mark, I'm going to start out with a question that I feel really everybody on the planet should be able to answer. Why is the sterile processing industry important?
Well, to me, Vanessa, I think everybody answers that a little bit differently. Some people say, hey, it's my job, so I'm a pro. Some people think like it's how I feed my family. Some people feel really the appeal and the attraction to being part of the patient care. And all of them are accurate. All of them are true. But I tend to think of it, I take a step back and think of it almost just from a business standpoint. Like, I look at sterile processing or medical device reprocessing, as our friends in Canada call it. It's an integral part of $1 billion high-tech industry called the operating room. And I think the more times CEOs and instrument techs and everybody in between thinks that way, it sort of changes how you look at it, how you present, and how you work every day, and how you bring value and respect to your department, but also show, like, I can't stand the term sterile processing is a cost center. No, it's not. And I will argue with anybody all day long. It is not a cost center. It is an integral part of $1 billion high-tech industry called the operating room. And that's it. I'm too old anymore not to argue with people. How's that? How's that for passion, Vanessa?
That's right. Hey, well, I appreciate that passion. At the time of this recording,
you've lived it.
Yes. Yeah. I recently, very, very recently post-op. So everybody who feels that this industry is important has a little special place in my heart. And that includes you.
That's it. You just went through it. Everybody goes through it at some point, or someone they care about goes through it. And surgery is not to be taken lightly, nor is any step of the process.
Yep. Every little piece is important, and the tiniest little thing could impact the rest of someone's life.
Very much so. Yeah.
All right. So I know I gave my version of an overview of what we're discussing today, but do you want to explain a little further, since you are, this is one of your niches?
Yeah. This is where my size 14 in both departments and my rig. Yeah. Like what I like to talk about are the economic components of the operating room and sterile processing departments in a way that, Vanessa, you may hear. I don't hear anybody else necessarily describing it this way, which doesn't necessarily mean I'm really cool. What it means is I think people are starting to get this, but not everybody's talking about it. And like I'm going to describe, because I'm not really cool. Let's be clear about that.
I think you're cool.
Well, I got plenty of witnesses who will disagree with you. Right? So I tend to describe things like what I like to tell sterile processing folks. Here's what the C-suite, the OR, sterile surgical services, surgeons. Here's what they're trying to accomplish, and we oftentimes teach to the operating room leadership what sterile processing is trying to accomplish. But realistically, everybody's feeding towards what can surgical services accomplish, right? And I think if everybody thinks of themselves as team members, that's a really good approach to have. I'll talk about some of the surgical trends that you and I have experienced over the past 10, 12, 15 years. And I'll talk about what's coming, right? And I do think I'm going to talk about how I think sterile processing should look at themselves as a really good teammate. I'm a sports guy. So surgical services you're part of that team and those team members and the C-suite. And how do you get a seat at that table? And to answer your first question, you have to respect what you do. But you also have to know how to present what you do to those folks in a way that lets your teammates in surgical services win. Because if they win, so will you. And again, I'm a basketball guy. That's the way basketball people are trained. Like, if I can make Vanessa look good, Vanessa will be good and she'll want to make me look good and she'll want to play with me. Right. I mean, that's the way we think. And I urge places to think about this. And as you can tell, I'll try to make it colorful and maybe entertaining by using sports as an analogy. Sorry to the non-sports fans, but it tends to speak to a broad audience when we do that. So that's what I'm going to try to talk about: what the OR and C-suite is looking for, what surgeons want, and the trends that are coming, which are very important.
It's a ripple effect. So if a sterile processing professional is wanting to make this case for their department, what is some critical information that they're going to need to know at the beginning of this process?
Yeah, and I'm going to take one step back from that for a second and say, too often I hear sterile processing department folks saying, we need more washers. Just had somebody say it to me yesterday, we need more people, right? And I would say sterile processing has a pretty big history of needing a lot of things and rarely getting them, rarely being paid attention to. Doesn't mean you don't need them, but like when you take that approach, it almost slows you down, right? So I would say when people are thinking about, man, you're going to think we need more people. We need an instrument tracking system, right? You and I were talking about that. We need more washers. You can think that way all day long because you do as a leader. But when you present it, you got to present it in a way, in my opinion, that shows those other teammates, the operating room, surgical services, surgeons, how what you do can let them win. And I'll show you an example of that. But to do that, you need to sort of know your numbers as a sterile processing department. And most people do it. It helps to have sort of like your tracking information helps them pull stuff so fast that they couldn't pull 10 years ago when they didn't have it, right? But you also need to know what the OR values, like what are their numbers? What are their costs? What are their problems? What are their KPIs, right? And does what you need, if you got it, does it help them do those things, solve those problems, hit those numbers? So that's sort of like that attitude change that I think some of the really good leaders, who I have gotten to know over the years, that's the way they think. And it's amazing the investments they get because I think they describe things a little bit differently. So Like I'll give you a couple of examples. I know you and I talked about this, right? So here's some perspective. The operating room in a hospital accounts for 60% of the overall revenue to that hospital. An ambulatory surgery center, because I'm sure you have different audiences here, 99% of the revenue to an ambulatory surgery center is from surgical procedures, right? Like that's it. I mean, both, regardless of whether you're in an ambulatory surgery center or you're in a hospital, both are number one. It's not the ICU. It's not the ER. It's not the pharmacy, and it is not the coffee shop. It is the operating room. I mean, there's people lined up.
Let's be real.
People are lined up at the Starbucks. I get it. It could be. You could
second place,
but it's not, right? 60% of it. So think about it. Your hospital, if they do $2 billion in revenue, 60% of that, that's $1.2 billion comes out of that operating room. That's the revenue engine of hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers. So when I say you're an integral part of a high-tech, multi-billion-dollar industry, I'm not joking. You are, right? So sterile processing numbers tend to be $50 for us to reprocess a set of orthopedic instruments, right? 37 cents an instrument. I think I saw somebody post one time, somebody who knew, how long does it take for us to sterilize something? How long does it take for us to decontaminate something? Time from decontamination doorway to finished product to the OR, right? Or the sterile shelf, whatever it is. Those are your metrics. Here are the OR's metrics. Their numbers go something like this: $50 a minute. That's at least $50 a minute. $10,000 for a set of instruments. $45,000 for this is going to sound really smart, Vanessa, you'll like it. Right? $45,000 for a return surgery within 30 days of the initial episode of care. That basically means, doesn't it sound smart? It basically means if you have to come back within 30 days of you having surgery, the hospital has to pay for that. Medicare does not pay for it. Neither do private insurers. That's a relatively recent change, past 5-6 years, right? So those are numbers in the heads of directors of surgical services, C-suite, VPs. Those are numbers they know. They also know, you'll see numbers all over the place, but it's usually between $35,000 and $75,000 per surgical site infection, right? So they're looking at turnover time, door-to-door time, door-to-incision time. Time is money as well. So sterile processing knows their numbers. Do they know their operating rooms numbers? Because I think if they do, they're better equipped. And here's a big one you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago. Contribution margin, really, again, a fancy term for the profit they make off of these cases. Ortho and spine are by far and away the largest contribution margin cases in a hospital or surgery center that they make the most margin on, right? Money. That's basically what it is. So it's why two things. It's why you see how the ortho and spine guys have all the cool gadgets, because they make money, right? The other part is that's why you see them on billboards, because hospitals don't advertise the coffee shop because they don't make much money on it. They don't advertise other, like if it doesn't get patients in or make them money, they're dumb if they're advertising it. I'm going to tell you that, right? And you don't see many of them that are dumb.
That's true,
right? So that's how you know what matters. But I always say, ask them. Go ask them. They will tell you, right? So if sterile processing people understand, man, my teammates up there, if we can shorten their turnover time, it's valuable. If we can let them do more cases in a day, it's valuable. And we'll talk about how valuable that is. That's the mindset I think they should have.
No, absolutely. You bringing up the billboards made me think in my area, I'm like, all I ever see is ortho and spine.
Yeah. I mean, you'll see some robotic stuff and you'll see some ER time, right? And basically what it is it means if you come here, we get you in the building, and then we know if we get you in the building, we're more likely to be the place where you go for your other things. That's it. Yeah. That is it. Yeah. It's not because
exactly.
Yeah. It's not because of some wonderful soul that everyone has. It's because it's where, you heard me say this a couple weeks ago, the answer to all of your questions is money. Don Ohlmeyer said that years ago on Monday Night Football. I would add in healthcare, there's an additional is patient safety, because do no harm applies where it does not apply at Chick-fil-A or does not apply at necessarily Walmart, right? Like they don't say, hey, we can't make a move before we know we're not endangering our patients. So that's why healthcare is a little bit different. So I always joke, the answer to all of your questions is money and patient care.
Yes.
But it's probably in that order. Right? It's probably in that order.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, it's reality. It's the reality in the world in which we live. So we can either rail against it, like old man Simpson yelling at the clouds, or we can try to work within those boundaries and do both. Because if you can do both, you got a chance.
Yeah. Keep your patients safe and bring in some money for your facility. You're on point.
Yeah, not a cost center.
What is the importance of the sterile processing department as it relates to the importance of the OR? And like I said, I think we pretty well covered it, but if you have...
I like the analogy though, because this, again, here's the analogy. If the operating room is the revenue engine of that Formula One, let's use sports, $1 billion high-tech industry, sterile processing is the pit crew, right? And the pit crew is integral to success and the financial goals of the OR. So how does this relate to the OR? I always laugh, right? Like the wheelman, the dude that takes the wheel off and puts it on in a Formula One race in 2.3 seconds makes $250,000 to put a wheel, right? It's insanity. Why? Because it's the difference between a $10 million win this weekend in Saudi Arabia and a $500,000 10th place. It's enormous, right? And yes, the driver and spectators could die if the wheels comes off, right?
Yeah.
That's catastrophic. Sound familiar? Sterile processing, right? It's the same thing. But make no mistake, the wheelman makes $250,000 a year because winning means money. Driver and safety, and spectator safety in this case, they just sort of come along for the ride, right? And again, it's the reality. It's the reality. So that's the way I relate it.
Yeah, that's actually pretty spot on.
Although I don't know how many sterile processing people are making $250,000 a year. I wish them well. It'd be cool.
Yeah, no, that's a whole other conversation.
Get somebody smarter in for that conversation.
Oh, geez, yeah, that's the debate of the century right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had mentioned a few minutes ago that we're going to run through some scenarios where you break down a couple, hypothetical situations. Might not be hypothetical for some sterile processing departments. On they have a need and what they need to do to try to get it met. So to start off with, what are some trends in the surgical industry that you could tell us about and how they will affect our sterile processing departments?
Well, real briefly, you saw it. I've seen it. Orthopedic and spine cases have doubled in the past 12 years in the United States. And they're going to double again by 2033. And so we'll use ortho and spine because again, they have the large contribution margin. That's what the operating room is trying to do. And that's what the billboards show. So I joke, it's a total joint tide that's been rising and we're about to see a surgical tsunami over the next 15 years. So imagine doing, like I ask every person in sterile processing to say, imagine doing what you're doing, twice as many in 10 years, knees, hips, shoulders, spines. Just take a second and think about that.
I would cry. I really would.
Yeah, exactly. It's daunting. But I mean, like the contribution margin on those cases is so high that everybody wants to do more of them. And the baby boomers are going to guarantee there's a waiting caseload to get to it. So you can either cry, which maybe we do at some point, right? Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to embrace it. Let's embrace this. And how the heck are we going to do that? And we got a couple of examples, but I would say, I would think vendor reps should think this way. Sterile processing should think this way. Operating room and surgical services should be thinking this way. And I think they're coming around. So, we had an example we talked about needing washers, right? And I warn your listeners, nerd alert. Here it comes, nerd alert. So I'll try to keep this simple. So the example we've talked about is, let's imagine your hospital, Vanessa's hospital, wants to do more joints. Not hard to imagine. Every one of them wants to do it. But you know your washers, for example, are from the 90s, the 1890s. Right? Like, and we've seen it. You know, we all laugh about it. You're like, oh, yeah. I'd say. So I pulled this data from a hospital I used to go in all the time. They had a 40-minute wash cycle. They had 2 washers, right? And so they basically said, look, from the time I hit start on this washer to the time I can take it out and really dry it, it's about an hour. So they had those little washers that could do 6 levels. So they could do 12 levels per hour because they had 2 washers, right? They could do 192 levels in their first and second shift, 16 hours, right? So that's it. That was their capacity within those 2 shifts. And that's assuming the washer didn't break down, everything but right. And I don't even want but let's just say best case scenario. They're maxed out at 192. This place did 10 joints a day, which is 100 levels of instruments, typically speaking. You added in ENT, a couple of spine cases and a couple of general cases, and they were already 92%. They were at 177 levels on average going through their washer. Does this sound familiar, Vanessa? Just in 3/4 of the places we all go, right? And you guys have the data. You have census tracking data. You see it, right? So if you wanted to add 2 more joints, what hospitals tend to underestimate is hold it. Can our PIC crew keep up? Are we going to have to hire more PIC crew? Are we going to have to pay overtime? Because we can only push through so much stuff, right? Your washers are maxed out. Your total joints the additional ones, will exceed your current capacity. These are facts. These cannot be disputed. Now, you'll notice I'm not saying we need a washer. I'm just saying, hey, we're at 92%. If we add cases, our capacity will be exceeded. Well, that is it. And then I would say, now, $150,000 investment in 2 big new weapons grade automated washers sort of beefs up our capacity to 648 levels on those 2 shifts. We can handle, you guys can go get that competitive orthopedic surgeon across town. And if you bring her over, she's going to bring 2 joints, or 2 days a week. She's going to bring, 3 joints a day, 2 days a week. That's 300 joints a year at about $20,000 in reimbursement. That's about $6 million in revenue. Remember contribution margin that we talked about, the profit on it? That's about $1.5 million in contribution margin. And that's enormous money. And if sterile processing is talking about that and they present that to directors of surgical services, they can say, hey, her 30 procedures or 5 weeks of her surgery pays for our $150,000 washers. But more importantly, the director of surgical services, you guys can go get that surgeon, bring in $6 million in revenue. And by the way, sterile processing, you get your washers. It's a team game. You just showed them how they can make a lot of money, bring in more ortho and spine. We already know they want it. You're the point guard in hoops. Your job is to make those folks look good and make them money. And but accidentally, they're like, yeah, you know what? $150,000. Yeah, let's do that. Because they're looking at $6 million and $1.5 million in contribution margin. Right now, that's a nerd alert. That's a lot of numbers I throw at people. But we'll be glad to explain it to anybody on the side personally, anytime they want, right? But that's an example of, I just hear people going, oh, we need new washers. We don't have enough washers. We need more. That's not, how successful has that been getting investments in your department?
It's like when one of my kids comes to me and says, Mom, I want this. And I go, and do you need it?
Yep. Census gives you great data. How are you going to take action with it? And if you understand the OR's data, and you just have to kind of ask them, or you can, most of the numbers I pull for this talk are coming from the Google machine, right? It's not that hard. And if somebody says, I don't want to even do that, Copeland, send me your email. I'll send it to you. I don't care. I'm not making any money on this. So how was that for one example, Vanessa?
That was a great example. Definitely relatable to, like you said, about 3/4 of the sterile processing departments and that we know.
Yes. Yeah.
And and breaking it down in a logical way that will make sense to your higher ups. Because again, just saying we want this, it's not going to get you to that finish line.
Yeah. And honestly, we need this sounds like you're pleading, and you're not. What you're actually saying is, in your mind, you should be saying, you guys need this. If you want to hit those goals, you need this. I'm going to show you how to deliver it, and I'm going to show you what you'll get out of it. That wins. That gets things. Because you're actually thinking of everybody else first. You just happen to come along. You get something good out of it as well. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, isn't it?
It is. It is. But it's great. I love it. It's great. Secret fun fact. I love numbers. So
you and I are fellow nerds.
We are. I'm a huge nerd. I will tell everybody. My second grader, she says something about a nerd, and I'm like, do you know who you're talking to?
Well, we're gonna nerd out here.
Yes, absolutely. All the data, all the facts, because if it's a fact and it's in black and white, it makes it harder to argue against. It's not wishful thinking or hypotheticals. You're saying, here's the numbers, here's the data, here's the history.
Right. And too many times I hear these folks saying, they lead with, look, I'm in sales. Like, I've been taught how to present things to the people that I'm talking to that matters to them. Right. And too many times sterile processing will say, we need these. We're risking patient safety. And if that was effective as a persuasion tactic, you'd already have the washers. It's not. It's like the F1 driver safety and spectator space. It kind of comes along with it. But if you can prove with data the economic benefits to all of the teammates, oh, and by the way, we keep patients safe. Oh, and by the way, we're less likely to get a Joint Commission or DNV or AAAHC citation. Well, now people are like, oh, now you have my attention. And I think most folks know they need these things, but if you adjust how you present it, I think your batting average goes up, So,
Mark, great scenario for arguing for equipment, bringing up all the data that you need. And I am sure that every sterile processing department has a specialty or more than one specialty that needs more instruments, especially when they want to bring in a new surgeon, because let's be real, they bring in a new surgeon and they don't increase the instrument amounts, you're in for a rough time. So can you walk us through an example pertaining to that?
Yeah. And I would say places should try to get ahead of this, right? So you can still make your case after they brought the new surgeon in, but it's much easier to do it before they bring the new surgeon in. And I'll give you an example of one that we see everywhere and everybody has probably experienced. So like, let's say you got two sports medicine orthopedic surgeons, right? And one operates on Tuesday, one operates on Thursday. They're partners. And they both have patients booked out for 4 months. This is commonplace. And they're both irritated that they can't add an extra case on Tuesday and Thursday because the hospital doesn't have enough instruments. I mean, it's everywhere, right? Yeah. So the set of instruments costs, let's say $10,000. That's generally a rule of thumb, back of the envelope. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to get, again, nerd alert. The CPT code is 29827 for a surgeon. And that surgeon makes, in the hospital outpatient surgery setting, that's where these numbers are, $1,097 per procedure. Right? Hospital outpatient reimbursement per CMS is $6,347 per shoulder scope. Nerd alert. The contribution margin is probably around $1,000. It's not a total joint, which has even higher contribution margins, but it's pretty significant, right? So again, have I lost anybody here? Because I'm nerding out a little bit, right? So surgeon makes a little over $1,000 every time they do it. Hospital outpatient surgery center makes around $6,300 every time. And on that $6,300 in money, they make about $1,000 in profit. Okay. Mm-hmm. If we were to invest, you and I are running the sterile processing department, right? if we invested that $10,000 in a set of instruments, Surgeon A can use it on Tuesday, Surgeon B can use it on Thursday. So all we need is one set of instrument. Each adds that case per week, one case per week. So that's 2 additional shoulder scopes per week. That's 100 extra shoulder scopes a year. And you say, wow, how important is that? Well, allow me, as they say in Pulp Fiction, allow me to retort. Surgeon A makes $55,000 more per year for his practice. So does his partner. That's $110,000 in additional revenue they just made this year by getting more patients on their surgical schedule in one day a week. The hospital makes $636,700 a year. Relatively significant amount of money. Contribution margin on that is right around $100,000 a year. The return on investment is 10 cases or 5 weeks. So they pay off that set of instruments in 5 weeks that they'll probably use for another 5 years. The cost benefit ratio, which we have not talked about, is 64 to 1, $640,000 to $10,000, and 10 to 1 on profit. Nerd alert, right? But here's the, and this does get lost in this. Patient gets surgery sooner and is back to normal life sooner. And CEOs are like, oh yeah, and we don't lose them to the guys across town because we couldn't get them in 4 months. We could tell 4 months from now. But honestly, most importantly, you get your procedure sooner. You're back to activities of daily living sooner. You're hugging your kids. You're playing whatever it is you do, right? Like the patient actually wins. And you, my highly intelligent sterile processing wizard, you don't have to stand on your head Tuesdays and Thursdays trying to turn a set over, right? So you do benefit, but you bring it up at the end. You're just trying to make sure, hey, surgeons are happy, OR's happy, CEO's happy, patients happy, and I don't have to light things on fire Tuesdays and Thursdays to keep up, right?
Oh no.
Yeah. So think about that. And you just made an unbelievable business analysis. And we'll show you how to present it really fast in an executive summary. It's 5 sentences. Mm-hmm. It's 30 seconds. But if you do it, which is kind of what I just did, you may not bat 1,000, but people are going to be like, shoot, we probably should be doing this, right? Because that is not the response people get. And you know who struggles, Vanessa? Surgeons struggle to do this. They're so used to getting whatever they want. Now they don't. And they're like, I don't understand it. Why do I not get what I want? I'm like, well, you don't know how to make a business presentation, right? And so I help some surgeons do this. I'm like, I need your numbers. Give me your numbers. Give them to me. Give me all the data you have. I'll get some more, and we're going to put one together. And you go propose this, and I'll bet you're more likely to get it than you're not. And yeah, so it's not just sterile processing. It's vendor reps. It's people like your company, mine, surgeons. Everybody struggles with this. Those who succeed have a big advantage, and it's not hard. So I hope that that gives me. I used to scratch my head. I'm like, what do you mean you can't afford a $10,000 set of instruments? Right? You got $300 million of instruments floating around in this hospital somewhere. And until, thank God, somebody started bringing in instrument tracking systems, oh, thank God, we kind of know where everything is now. Well, that seems helpful, right?
Yes.
It's insanity.
Yeah.
I can tell you this, Walmart does not operate that way. Walmart knows where their stuff is.
They do. Yeah.
Absolutely. We don't. Don't. We're getting there.
Well,
we do now.
I think, we're getting there. We're getting there. Yeah. No, I think sometimes with you brought up the instrument tracking systems, when you implement from paper tracking to digital tracking, it's finding all the little hidey holes and so-and-so's got an extra dressing set in their locker just in case, or this doctor likes to keep these instruments in his desk drawer, these weird not acceptable locations. And then you have to not only implement the process, get everybody on board and be like, you can't take these home.
Yeah. It's a lot of work up front, but it pays for itself from an economic standpoint pretty quickly. But more importantly, you actually everybody can do their jobs better, including surgeons. And who benefits? Patients do. right? I mean, like, it's astounding. So yeah, it's, and you know me, I got no conflict of interest here, right? Like, I'm not talking about your instrument tracking because I make money on it. I do not. I just think places are crazy if they don't have them. And they're lesser and less. There's fewer and fewer of them every time. So, but yeah, like, so yeah, I presented this at that meeting you and I were at sort of how to do an executive summary of this. And it's something I had to be taught. And like, I'll rattle it off and, but you know me, Vanessa, like at the end of this, we'll say how to contact me. Anybody can send me. I'm very sincere about this. Anybody can send me their issues and I'll ask them a couple questions and it'll kind of say, hey, if you don't know the answers to these questions, you got to go find them, but you can find them and I'll help them try to do that because I am passionate about this. But like, this is how MBAs present it, of whom I am not one, but this is how they present. They do an executive summary, what it's called. In healthcare, it's got 5 components. In typical business, it's 4 components, but we add a 5th because healthcare has do no harm, and now value analysis to it. So your executive summary goes something like this. It's, what is the situation? What are the economics? What are any value analysis benefits, which is a whole different topic? What's the return on investment? What's the cost benefit ratio? That's it, right? So here's how we do those surgeons. Here's the situation. Currently, we have 2 busy orthopedic surgeons who are experiencing a backlog of patients who need shoulder surgery. Here are the economics. A $10,000 capital investment in a set of instruments allows those surgeons to book 2 more cases a week, immediately increasing orthopedic service line revenue to $640,000 of annual revenue and an ortho contribution margin of about $100,000 annually. So that's the economic part. Here's the value analysis. Additional benefits include an increase in patient satisfaction because they're in sooner and done on time, and surgeon satisfaction because they're making more money and they're running on time. Those are value analysis components. Return on investment, it's paid for in 5 weeks. And the cost benefit is $10,000 in investment, $640,000 in revenue is 64 to 1, and $100,000 in contribution margin, 10 to 1. Nerd alert, right? But that's how you present it. Like, Vanessa, if you put your request together and sat with the CEO in that Starbucks we were talking about, and you did this, that CEO is going to do one of 2 things. They're going to say, should we buy 2 sets of instruments, right? If they're really good, right?
Yeah.
Because you presented it in a way they understand. This is how they synthesize data.
Yep.
Or they're going to say, I don't know, because I don't know who you are, but who are you, right? And seriously, you could walk and say, yeah, when you think you're ready to look for it, I'll come up and see you, or you can come down to sterile processing department. You probably should anyway. Like, you should come down and see our department, see what we do.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But I mean, like, they don't go, oh, Vanessa, you have no idea what you're talking about. They actually will say, I had no idea. Explain that to me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would joke, like, if you don't have their attention, they're not listening, right?
Yeah.
It's not that you're not talking their language. They're not paying attention. That happens.
Yeah.
Right? You got to practice.
Yeah.
But
yes.
Nerds practice. That's what you have to do. But I mean, I think that's a point guard. You just sat with the CEO and said, I'm about to make you $640,000 in top line revenue. Is that something you might be interested in? Those old sales nerdy techniques.
You open with that, they're going to go,
you in.
I'm sorry, what?
yeah. But
let me buy you a coffee.
Exactly. They may buy you the coffee, which they probably should. So, like, if a CEO doesn't, every CEO, every VP, every director of surgical services will get that. They may say, prove that to me. Where'd you come up with that? But they're not going to say you're wrong. Yeah. I mean, they shouldn't, right? And if you got somebody who's disagreeing, if you got a C-suite who's like, I don't know. Next 2 people I'd go talk to is your director of surgical services. I do the same presentation. And then those 2 surgeons.
Yes. So then they're bombarding him.
Dr. Hammerswinger, You interested in maybe making an extra $55,000 this year? They were like, what was that?
I do one more procedure per week. Like,
Yes. And that's why I don't understand this. And you guys have such good data. You make this so much easier for people, but you still have to, then they still have to turn around and go, here's how you use it. Here's how you get what you want. And it's not because of you. It's because of everybody's better. Right.
Yeah.
And that's, you and I love this stuff. We can talk about this all day long.
Yeah.
And I do think it matters. And med device is not very good at doing this. We're learning, but for as many people as I have on the clinical side, surgeons, sterile processing people reaching out to me saying, hey, could you explain that to me again? I have 10 times as many med device companies reaching out to me going, hey, what was that again? Could you help us with this? And I'm not saying that I had no idea. I thought people thought this way. They don't. Or I don't know. So, yeah. That's all I got for you today, Vanessa. I got nothing else.
That's a lot. Let's be real. That is a lot. And like I said at the beginning, if anybody is like, hold on a minute, rewind the episode, watch it again, put it on a loop on your drive to work.
Right. Oh God, there's got to be better things to listen to than me talking economics, but they should.
Well, if they're
podcast.
If they're in one of these scenarios or one similar to it, and they're like, how do I get what I need? Like, this is gold right now, right here.
Yeah. I feel like it's sort of hidden gold that's right in front of everybody if they can collect some of the data. And I also know I'm in sales. My job isn't to tell you how to do something. My job is to tell you what you get out of it and help you do it. So I would say to anybody that's listening to this, regardless who they are, if you think I can help, email me, hit me on LinkedIn, and I'm glad to, because it is important. Frankly, patients deserve it, right? You just went through this. I've been through it. Everybody we know goes through this at some point. Patients deserve it. There should not be instruments in lockers, and there should not be people in sterile processing crushing themselves trying to keep up with operating room surgical tsunamis. It's not right. And from a business standpoint, it's dumb, right? Let's stop being dumb. Let's start being a little bit smarter. And so, yeah, so that's, I tell this to anybody. I'm sincere, and you know it, Vanessa. Like, if you know anybody else that hears it, send them my way. I will help them because it's valuable.
That's how we're getting this conversation. Cause I was like, well, let me reach out to him. He opened that door. I'm going to walk through it.
Exactly. You're not the only one, but you're one of the first. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I think it was the next day after I heard you speak, I was like, hey, Mark, how's it going?
Yeah. I don't think the sun had set twice by the time I got a message from you. And that's cool, right? Like, I like that because someday you'll probably end up helping me with something, right? Or I'll have to ping you and go, hey, we're doing a cost benefit thing here. Could you help? Do you have any sense of this?
Yeah.
And you'll help me because we help each other,
Absolutely.
right? Because we actually are in all this, in this together for patients.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. Well, you mentioned one way to reach out to you was your LinkedIn. So folks who are on LinkedIn, if you're not, the sterile processing industry lives there. So you should totally do it. But Mark is there. And then you mentioned your email, but you didn't give us your email address yet. So
sure. It's M as in Mark, mcope67 at gmail.com. So mcope67 at gmail.com. And, reach out again, or if you're on LinkedIn, DM me. I'm just trying to think, is there any other way to get it? It's probably the two easiest ways for people to get a hold of me. Yeah.
Don't give out your personal cell phone number.
No, but my social security number is no.
Stop. That's just asking for a world of trouble. Yeah.
It is so good to talk to you, Vanessa. I'm so glad. It's so nice to see you. It's
yes.
And I like what, I know you're involved with CASP. I know you've stood in the shoes of these folks you're talking to, and now you're trying to help them. And, we're kind of kindred spirits that way, I feel.
Yes.
So I like that. I admire what you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm just trying to be a little force in the world, making life better. That's my objective.
We're going to make your mom proud.
Yeah, well, she apparently is. So there's that. She has no idea what I really do. And she keeps offering me business assistance from her degree that she got in like the 80s or 90s. So she means well.
Yes. And you listen to her. She's your mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's my mom. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you want to bring up? Any parting wisdom, advice, points, jokes, sports references?
Yeah. No, it's right. It's a team sport. Think of them as your teammates, and they were more likely to invite you to the table because, frankly, you deserve to be at the table. But just saying you deserve it isn't going to get you there. Go prove it. And it stinks that the burden of proof is on the people in sterile processing, but it's reality. And you can either do that, or as we talked earlier, cry when you see the caseload that's coming. Let's not cry. Let's surf that wave, baby. Let's not look for life preservers, right? Let's surf that big wave coming and get you what you need, your team needs, and your people need. Let's do that.
Exactly. Well, Mark, in closing, thank you again for taking the time today to break down this seldom discussed topic, which hopefully after this episode airs is going to cause its own tsunami, and your inbox will be flooded with people and you'll say, what did I do?
Yeah. What did I do? Why did I say that on Vanessa's podcast?
Well, it's the census one, but I'm the face now. Yes, so it's been great talking to you. And even though I had heard this at my local chapter conference, I feel like I still learned more things from you. And I will probably be one of those people who listens to it a couple of times just because, nerd alert. For those of you listening, thank you for joining us on this episode of ConCensis Podcast. If you want to hear more from Censis, go to censis.com. We have our podcasts there. You can go to YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. Hit the subscribe button. Stay on top of what we're doing. It's going to be great. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.